Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. All right, there we go. Alrighty then. So, today is Tuesday, December the 3rd, 2024. So, I hope everybody's having a good week thus far. We're going to give people a chance, of course, to come in. Um, while we're waiting for people to come in. Friendly reminder, of course, if you haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here we talk about tonight grabs your attention, feel free to comment and/or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. As I said, we're waiting for at least a couple minutes to see if um, anybody else comes in. I guess what I can do here is see if I can try to rustle up some more viewers if possible here by sending some more links out to some people I think might be interested in watching. Anyway, so hopefully and as always too, if anything else comes to mind in the world of niche, feel free to bring those up as well. With that, hopefully that might draw in some more people now. Let's see. Well, we're almost at the 3 minute mark now. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about what's on tap for tonight. So tonight we got a couple articles we're going to go over from. Well, one is from Bleeding Fool, but the other one is a bit of a passing that we're going to, of course, talk about. Let's take care of something here real quick, and then I will go into more detail. All right. So tonight first off we're gonna touch upon the recent passing of voice actress Morgan Lofting, who passed away last Wednesday. Known, of course, primarily for her work on as the voice of the Baroness on the GI Joe cartoons of the '80s and early '90s. Then we're going to also be looking at an article surrounding involving Alan Moore of Watchmen fame. So the guy who wrote the Watchmen books. Also, of course, we'll have we'll have the Russian wrap up and then this day in niche history. So with all that being said, of course, why don't we go ahead? I guess we'll let me do one more thing here, and then we will probably get going here. Oh. All right. So with that, just do one more. All right. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started then on some of the material here. talking about. So first off, we're going to look back at the life and career of Morgan Lofting. Um, so just for those of you who, of course, don't remember, Morgan Lofting, of course, she did the voice, primarily known for doing the voice of the Baroness, from the G.I. Joe cartoons of the 80s and early 90s. She also had a few other voice roles as well. She was born February 15th, 1949, passed away this past Wednesday, November 27th, this past Wednesday, November 27th, the day before Thanksgiving. So aside from, of course, her work on G.I. Joe, let me go back down here. She also provided the English voice for Princess Invidia for the Star Blazers adaptation. Star Blazers, I believe, was what they called space battleship Yamato. She also provided the voice of Aunt May Parker and Black Cat in the early 80s, in the 81-82 Spider-Man cartoon. She was also lent her voice to Meatballs and Spaghetti. Talked about, of course, her being the voice of the Baroness in G.I. Joe, a number of the G.I. Joe cartoons from the 80s and early 90s. Let's see. She, of course, also provided the voices of Moonracer and Firestar in an episode. Lent her voice a few times to a few episodes on Transformers. Let's see, a couple episodes of Gem where she was Vera and Lexa. So, and she even lent her voice to 4 episodes of Ben 10 Omniverse as Festina, Yetta, and a few others. So Morgan Lofting passing away at the age of 75 on let's see, one other little interesting little note from her career course. Along with Ed Gilbert, Jerry Hauser, Robert Remus, who everybody knows better as Sergeant Slaughter, and of course Chris Latta. She was one of course, 5 actors involved in both the 1980s G.I. Joe cartoons as well as the early 90s G.I. Joe cartoons. So, so there you go. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to Bleeding Full, but before we do get into the next article, of course, all right. So, anyways, before we do get into that next article, there, in fact, I'll just stop share screen for a moment. I'd like to do a little bit of a moment of silence for Miss Lofting for the work, in in um, as a sign of respect for her career as a voice actress. So we're gonna do a moment of silence, then we'll move on to the next story here. All right. So with that being said, now that we are, yes, take care of something here real quick. I should probably go off camera here for a quick moment. Put some music on to keep all. Wow. I'll be right back. All right. So now with that being done and said, let's go ahead and move on to the next article, which I believe will take me quite a bit more time here. And it is an Avi article. I know Avi likes to critique a lot of things, so this particular case, we'll see. He's critiquing Alan Moore. Well, actually, I guess the media's. So let's see. What's the media's embarrassing retcon of comic writer Alan Moore? Article by Avi Green, published yesterday, December 2nd. So this is Avi speaking here. Foreign Policy magazine, of all places, wrote a sugary take on comic veteran Alan Moore, some of his recent literary projects, which include the idea of, quote, inventing your own God, unquote. But first, they couldn't do this without some kind of silly distortion of history. And now we're going to the article that Avi is referencing here. England's greatest, weirdest living author lives in a terraced house in Northampton, where he worships a snake god in the basement. Okay. Alan Moore revolutionized the comics industry in the 1980s with Swamp Thing, in which a nearly forgotten character was turned into an exploration of the United States environmental and historical horrors and glories, and Watchmen, a wildly innovative work often described as the Citizen Kane of comics. So back to Avi here. Let's see. What kind of farce is this supposed to be? Swamp Thing was hardly "quote unquote" forgotten at the time. What with a movie that came out the same year, DC relaunched a solo comic for the plant monster, 1982. In parentheses there. And while it may not have initially taken off under the late Martin Pasco, who wrote nearly 18 issues before Moore took over, could hardly be called obscure, mainly because it was only about a decade since Swamp Thing even debuted in 1972. That's a beginning example of how a political journal like FP or Foreign Policy isn't qualified for addressing the arts. All right, so back to the article he's referencing here. His new book, The Moon and Serpent Bumper Book of Magic, written with fellow comics author Steve Moore, no relation, and illustrated by I think it should be a, not an, by a wide array of artists, is a self-help manual for a, quote, fulfilling new career as a diabolist, unquote. If I had to guess what a diabolist is, or diabolist, I'm guessing that has something to do with the devil. Diabolos is, of course, a word for another word for Satan or for the devil. Like the book itself, this claim is both a joke and entirely serious. The authors want you, the reader, to become a magician, but for them, it's more about creative inspiration than conjuring the spirits of the damned. Alan Moore is the most prominent of the wave of British talent, including Garth Ennis, Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman, and Warren Ellis, that came to dominate the U.S. comics industry in the 1980s and 90s. They were mostly young men from working class backgrounds, few of whom had attended university. Moore himself was kicked out of his secondary school for, as he put it in one interview, for being, quote, one of the world's most inept LSD dealers, unquote. Okay, so, all right, so now back to Avi here. Avi's response to what was just said there. All right, so Avi speaking now. Gee, now that's something to really force. That's something to really force one to take his resume with a grain of salt. It's one thing if somebody becomes an addict, which is dismaying, but worse if you distribute stuff that can harm others. That aside, curious how they cite Gaiman without consideration how he's accused of doing much worse. And even if Ellis didn't do anything as bad, it could still be argued he too is a letdown if he cheated the women he had affairs with by not helping them get the job interviews he's said to have offered helping out with. Strange they don't offer Jamie Delano, known for first writing Hellblazer, starring Moore's own creation of John Constantine, as an example of a UK writer. As a result, it just makes clear these periodicals are cheap and easy with their research and citations. As for becoming a magician, well, it'd be a lot more appealing if Moore hadn't become such a political letdown himself in the past decade, recalling his recent op-ed at The Guardian. Oh, boy. Wouldn't it be better if he became a realist? Yeah, that's the problem with some of these mainstream comic artists is that they, a lot of them turn out to be left leaning, and then they turn off like half the, instead of just sticking to their art, what have you, they turn off about half of their their fan base with their political views, or at least making them known. But anyways, I need to step I need to step away from the computer again for a moment. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about all that. Anyways, getting back to the article here. Let's see. So I believe, let's see. Yeah, this back to the Guardian article that Avi's referencing here, or foreign policy. I'm sorry, not Guardian. Foreign policy. Um, Comics simultaneously culturally undervalued and offering room for wild experimentation gave this group their canvas. Alan Moore's detailed, deeply researched, and wildly imaginative stories became instant classics. Watchmen, his most famous graphic novel, sells tens of thousands of copies each year. His takes on iconic characters like Superman and Batman still shape their portrayal today. But by the 1990s, he was burned out on superheroes, working instead on historical fiction like From Hell, in which he explores the Jack the Ripper murders and mythologies around them. Steve Moore, a friend of Alan Moore's, since they were both teenagers, was a comic book writer who left school at age 16. He was also a serious scholar, almost entirely self-taught of the Yi Jing, an ancient Chinese divination text, and a member of the Royal Asiatic Society. He also died a decade ago. This book, due in part to the difficulty in corralling so much artistic talent, has taken over 15 years to put together. Is a compilation using both art and text of their shared ideas on magic, society, and creativity, and perhaps the last gasp of a distinctly local take on the occult imagination. They're saying that Steve Moore died a decade ago, but it's kind of hard to, because didn't they note that they were working together now? Hmm. Okay, so maybe not then. All right, so in 1993, when he turned 40, Alan Moore announced in his local pub he was going to be a magician and took up the ceremonial worship of Glykon, an obscure Anatolian snake god whose cult enjoyed a brief period of popularity in second century Rome. As they recount in the book, the two Moors formed the world's smallest magical cabal around January 1994 when they had a joint revelation that, quote, in a space-time continuum of 4 dimensions, every entity and every moment is eternal, unquote. They also had a vision that they had, quote, intruded on a space of blinding witness where the discarnate, timeless idea forms of great magicians resided as a literal Illuminati, a convergence of illuminated minds beyond the boundaries of material existence. May be relevant that both authors were extremely high on mushrooms when this revelation occurred. Okay, so being on a psychedelic trip. Anyways, I'm going to need to go off camera here one more time. Sorry about this, folks. Be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that again. Anyways, let's get back to this article here. So now, obviously, speaking again here, and of course, that's a shame, though nowhere near as bad as dealing the trash and Moore's far left politics are one more reason why he's such a frustrating personality. I wonder how it is that drug addiction makes for an inspiration. Certainly not if one doesn't recognize, let's see, why it's hazardous to one's health. Even legal drugs can be dangerous. And honestly, I think it's ludicrous. Moore would specialize in writing tales about violent monsters like Jack the Ripper, especially when it's nothing compared to the modern crisis of Islamic terrorism. Now back to the article. Anyways, now back to the article from Foreign Policy here. So, in the United Kingdom today, localism is often associated with a spirit of, quote, Little Britain, unquote, a pinched, xenophobic, and Brexit-esque view of the world. The Moore's work comes from an entirely different tradition. We're digging into the layers of the place you come from, and your own mindscape can reveal ideas and emotions shared with the entire world. There aren't many writers doing that kind of digging today, especially from the political left. In parentheses here, Alan Moore has always been a fierce activist, including for LGBTQ plus rights. Unparentheses. As a history of magic and religion, the book should be taken with a healthy dose of salt. Take the figure of the quote unquote sorcerer. That bookends the work. This is a famous image from a prehistoric cave in France, purportedly showing a dancing magician who mixes aspects of animal and human. Unfortunately, though, the cave painting looks different in reality, and the image seems to have been largely invented by a French archaeologist in the 1920s. Now we're back to Avi's commentary on this. What about Moore's past conduct? Shouldn't that be taken with some salt? Also interesting how the article particularly makes Brexit out to sound like a bad thing, when all it's really about is maintaining self-determination without the EU interfering in UK affairs, European Union, United Kingdom. Not that any British governments till now have actually made things better, and as recent incidents make clear, the situation in the UK remains very dire. Even Moore doesn't seem particularly concerned. And back to the article here that Avi's referencing. There are some sweeping claims that should give a reader pause. I don't think, for instance, that, quote, the union between Jews and Protestants that Christian Kabbalah made possible would be a significant factor in the creation of the State of Israel, unquote. For a detailed scholarly take on the influence of the occult in England, I would turn instead to Ronald Hutton's work, such as Witches, Druids, and King Arthur, or Francis Young's political history, quote, Magic in Merlin's Realm, unquote. But the authors are aware of how blurry the lines are around the histories they relate and how the fiction can be more important. The magician, whose history is related to the greatest length, is Alexander of Abonotechus, a 2nd century charlatan and the creator of the snake god that Alan Moore himself worships, Glycon, who in real life was a drugged python in a blonde wig. Alexander's life is told in a series of Mad Magazine-style comic strips that dub him the, quote, quack with the knack, unquote, and the, quote, fake with a snake, unquote. For Alan Moore, as he described at length in one story, Glycon's great advantage as a god is that he is verifiably false, as he has, quote unquote, Glycon say, quote, This is the only way gods manifest in paint and props and poetry. I am not the docile python or the false head or the borrowed voice. I am the idea that generates these things. Unquote. And I guess here is Avi's response to that statement, or to that portion of the article. Some people might one day describe Moore as a false god. I just hope he didn't take a negative view of Israel. But as the following item from the Irish Times notes, Moore's writing resorts to the now tiresome cliche of attacking Christianity, and even seems to believe magic itself was only depicted in one angle for ages on end. And a friendly reminder, of course, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, anyways, continuing on here, is from this Irish Times article that Avi's referencing. Quote, right from the start, me and Steve said magic is not this big, spooky, dark thing that's intimidating and full of nightmares and horrors. We thought of magic as something that was quite beautiful and which, at times, appears to have a sense of humor. I mean, magic has got to have a sense of humor just to put up with the spectacularly absurd parade of magicians that emerged over the decades. Quote, we also wanted to dispel all this exclusivity. If we were to have a book of magic, it would have to be the kind of thing where whatever age you are, if you were to look at it, you would think, quote, in small quote, yeah, that's a book of magic. Unsmall quote. Even a 7-year-old, because the child's perspective of magic is, I think, just as important. It's where most of us get our attachment to magic and magical ideas. It's not for children, it's clearly for adults, as we say on the back cover. But we also wanted to have the quote best, in small quote, best children's annual ever made, smaller quote, kind of feel to it, unquote. Throughout, we encounter notorious sorcerers in sections titled Old Moore's Guide to the Great Enchanters, which offer nutshell biographies of practitioners like Solomon and Merlin, as well as later figures like Johann Faust, Simon Magus, John Dee, and Aleister Crowley, listing their lives and works, as well as propaganda efforts put in place by a Christian church in the ascendancy to make magicians seem wicked and evil. Interesting how they throw in Solomon in there. Solomon, considered a wise man in Jewish culture. I wonder. Let's see what Avi says about it here. Seriously, it's beyond boring already when Christianity is made a villain for tales like these. If Moore really cared, he'd take notice of how these Islamic societies, where magic and witchcraft are considered capital offenses, and for heaven's sake, they've been plenty of fantasy stories over past centuries where magic isn't just depicted as something monsters practice. Haven't they ever seen Elizabeth Montgomery in the 1964 to 72 sitcom Bewitched? You want magic with a sense of humor, that's definitely one place to go searching. I think Moore's choice of whom to depict as baddies, says all you need to know. He's the kind of writer who's out of touch with the times in his old of age. Besides, for somebody who's making the church a crook in his story, Moore apparently doesn't understand he's doing a certain form of excluding himself. What a shame that again, Moore's proving a more disappointingly insular type of writer many years after he was in his prime. The magic is long gone. All right, so there we go with that one. 41 minutes, so we're making good time. I'm going to step away from the computer one more time. Sorry about this, guys. My nose keeps acting up here. So anyways, I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Anyways, so now we're of course done with this article. We got through the two main stories of the night, so that I want to talk about. So now we're gonna move on to the wrestling wrap up. Talk a little bit, of course, about first off what happened on last night's Monday Night Raw, as they're now of course preparing for the premiere of the latest version of WWE's Saturday night's main event, which will be coming up a week from this Saturday on Saturday, December the 14th. Let's talk a little bit about what happened on last night's. Of course, they had the 10-year anniversary of the New Day happen, in which, apparently there have been some issues between Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods of late, but only for them to settle them, but not in the way that most people would have liked to see them settle them. As, of course, Big E made his return to WWE, as he's been recovering from his near paralysis from a couple years ago. Both Kofi and Xavier ended up kicking Big E out of the group, in essence turning heel. Now, granted, Big E, I don't think is cleared. Is still not cleared for any physicality. So why they didn't attack him physically, they basically just told him, no, you're gone. They blamed him for their recent struggles because he couldn't get, because unlike them and how they were able to get, come back from their injuries, he apparently wasn't able to come back from his. There has been some talk too about throwing the idea out there. I mean, he offered to manage him in the meantime until he can get physically cleared, but they said, no, we don't want that. So there's some talk that, now granted, all three members of all three members of the New Day, their contracts are all due up at the end of the year here, as I understand it. So, and there's been no indication that any of them have re-signed with the WWE as of yet. There has been some talk that maybe WWE might add time on, but that's unlikely, to Biggie, since he's been out for so long with injury. But that's not likely for a couple reasons. One, because he wouldn't. One, he probably wouldn't go anywhere anyways, but also it would kind of look bad on their part if they did. But so that story is going to be continually going on. Now, to get to some of the other, of course, matches that happened, get to the matches that happened on last night. The night opened up with a women's tag match in which the Judgment Day duo of the WWE Women's World Champion Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez of the Judgment Day defeating Damage Control duo of Kairi Sane and Io Sky in a continuation, of course, of that coming off of the War Games in an opening round in the opening round of the women's Intercontinental Title tournament, which was introduced last week. In a triple threat match, Dakota Kai of Damage Control defeated Katana Chance and Shayna Baszler to advance in that round. As it was recently announced that both SmackDown and Raw were going to add secondary women titles. SmackDown, it was a women's U.S. title, while on Raw it was the Intercontinental title, women's Intercontinental title. In a non-title match, Gunther defeated Dominic Mysterio. In which he beat him in just about 6.5 minutes. R-Truth defeated Pete Dunne in a singles match. Seth Rollins defeated Sami Zayn, as there's been some speculation trying to figure out, well, who attacked Jey Uso on last night's show. And there's some people saying that might be Seth Rollins. Other people are saying it might be Drew McIntyre. Now, McIntyre attacked Sami Zayn after the match. Attacked Sami Zayn after the match. So, but we'll see how things play out more there. So, with that being said, of course, that was on last night's Raw. That was what all happened on last night's Raw. Now we're going to give you a little bit of a sneak peek, or talk a little bit about what to expect for tonight's NXT event. On tonight's NXT, Nikita Lyons is set to take on Carmen Petrovic in a singles match. In some more Iron Survivor Challenge qualifiers, on the men's side, you have Cedric Alexander taking on Axiom, taking on Eddie Thorpe, taking on Lexis King. On the women's side, you have a fatal four-way match between Cora Jade, Ren Sinclair, Jada Parker, and Kalani Jordan. And then there will be a number one contendership tag team battle royal to see who has the number one contenders of the NXT tag team titles. As you have Tyson DuPont and Tyrek Egray taking on Hank and Tank, taking on Gallus. Gallus members Mark Coffey and Wolfgang, taking on the D'Angelo family members of Luca Crucifino and Channing Lorenzo, who are also taking on Out of the Mud duo of Bronco Nima and Lucian Price, And also, the No Quarter Catch Crew will also be involved in that match, as Miles Bourne and Tavian Heights will be involved in the match as well. Um, so as I said, as WWE continues to prepare um, for for um, for next Saturday's main event on NBC. Uh, now, now some AEW news to talk a little bit about, of course. So now Penta El Zero Miedo is now officially a free agent, as his contract has expired. Now AEW is still holding on to his brother, um, Ray Phoenix, um, basically adding time to his contract. You know, you know. I think this is to try to cool the Lucha Brothers off, so so that if and when they jump to the WWE, they won't, they'll lose some momentum. Now, there's been talk that Penta may take some indie bookings until his brother's available to go to the until his brother's contract is up. So you might see him, in your local wrestling company, wherever you may be. So might want to be on the lookout for that. And also for tomorrow night's Dynamite, as things are heating up, and of course the Continental Classic. We got the Winter is Coming event next week, the week of the 11th there. But tomorrow night from the Fishers Event Center in Fishers, Indiana, going to have Penelope Ford, and a Jaina women's match. Pac will be taking on Jay White, and of course the main event you'll see the Dynamite Dozen Battle Royal, already announced for that match. Lance Archer of Don Callis family, Kyle O'Reilly of the conglomerate, Lance Archer and Brian Cage of the Don Callis family, Kyle O'Reilly of the conglomeration, Adam Cole, Mark Davis, and Commander. And then you also have Swerve Strickland taking on Max Gasser. You have a couple matches in the Continental Classic happening, as in a Blue League match. You have the two points leaders right now in the Blue League, Shelton Benjamin and Kyle Fletcher taking on each other. In a Gold League matchup, you have two of the three points leaders taking each other on in Claudio Castagnoli and Brody King. So that's what you can look forward to tomorrow night on Dynamite. I'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow as well. Hey, Rick, thanks for dropping in. If you haven't already, of course, you can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. With that being said, of course, now we're done with the wrestling wrap-up, so I think I'm going to go right into the This Day in Each History segment. 2009. All right. So, anyways, first off, so today is December 3rd, 2024. Let's take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. So with that, let's see. First off, I'm going to head back 60 years ago. And on this date, 60 years ago, the 150th issue of Flash went on sale on this date back in 1964. Of course, the numbering was continued from the first 104 issues of Flash Comics as simply the Flash here. But on this date in 1964, the 150th issue of the Flash went on sale on this date back in 1964. Two stories were, of course, Captain Cold's Polar Perils, as the lead story there, featuring Captain Cold, written by Gardner F. Fox, penciled by Carmen Infantino, and inked by Murphy Anderson. And then the other story, the backup story for the book, also a Flash feature, the Touch and Steel Bandits. Again, written by Gardner Fox, penciled by Carmine Infantino, and then this one was inked by Joe Giella. So 60 years ago today, the 150th issue of Flash went on sale on this date 60 years ago today. Moving on to the next piece of niche history here. Moving all the way up to 1999, 25 years ago today. On this date, 25 years ago today, the feature-length anthology film Cartoon Noir premiered on this date in 1999. It consisted of 6 animated shorts from 5 countries. The short films brought together for this anthology were General Spirit from 1987, Club of Laid Off from 1989. The first one was a Polish film, Czech film, and then the English film Abductees from 1995. The Portuguese animated film, The Story of the Cat and the Moon from 1995. And then a pair of shorts from American filmmakers, Susan Pitt's Joy Street in 1996 and Julie Zamarchi's Ape, 1992. So 25 years ago today, Cartoon Noir premiered in theaters on this date back in 1999. And now moving ahead to 2009 here on this date in 2009. Asahi Productions OVA Tokimeki Memorial number 4 was released on this date back in 1999. The OVA is based on a Japanese dating sim game that was done by Konami as part of the Tokimeki Memorial series. So on this date back in 2009, which is 15 years ago today, the OVA for Tokimeki Memorial number 4 was released on this date back in 1999. With that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. We'll be back here with more niche news tomorrow. Also, this Sunday, I'll have Apex from Apex Comics with me. We'll be looking at comics that went on sale in April of 1940. In this case, focusing in on books that went on sale in Centaur Publications. So with that, later, Rick. So with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.